In 1842, a Russian child was born without a face, and no one questioned it, not the priest, not the mother, because the Carowway sisters had already been there. They never knocked, never spoke, just arrived barefoot. And left with something missing. Babies came back breathing, but not alive. They never cried, never blinked, just stared into the dark as if they remembered something no one should. The house the sisters lived in leaned to the left, like it was listening underground. And inside, something was always moving behind the walls. When one mother buried her child, the earth bled salt. When another tried to christen hers, the church font was dry and the altar covered in dead flies. This wasn't folklore, it was a bloodline, and it never ended. They traded more than herbs, they offered something in exchange, and now their name is being spoken again. That's not by accident, you heard it. You let it in, they came, and now so will you. They say Russia is a land of frozen time, but there are places, hidden between birch forests and forgotten steeples, where time didn't freeze, it rotted. In the year 1842, deep beyond the reach of the Tsar's riders, past any marked trail or cathedral bell, there stood a house, tall, narrow, leaning slightly left, as if eavesdropping on the bones beneath the soil. The locals called it the Carowway house. No one remembered why, only that it had always been there. Some said the sisters who lived there, and Eunice, Ha, and Merbth, were born under a red moon. Others whispered they were found in the thaw, wrapped in black lace and weeping sap. No birth records, no parish ties, but when blood spilled or wombs turned cold, it was not the village doctor summoned. It was one of them, always barefoot, always silent, carrying a linen bag and something else behind their eyes, something hollow and patient. Once inside, they never left until it was over, and something always changed. Their presence was not recorded by man but by death. A burial ledger rusting beneath a whitewashed cross listed only first names and causes. Eliza ruptured womb, Charity, breech birth, Ruth, bled dry. Each entry ended the same way, 3 initials etched in trembling script, T-E-C-M-C. The patterns screamed, but no one listened. The Carowways came where death loitered but did not finish. They whispered prayers in syllables not taught by priests. Their hands moved like they were braiding something unseen, and when they left, mothers often wept for reasons they couldn't name, because yes, the baby lived. But something else had been welcomed too, something that stood just behind the veil, peering through borrowed flesh. One winter, Jonah Bray's son was born silent, unmoving. When he opened his eyes, he didn't blink for 3 days. By then, the altar font had dried and flies covered the pulpit. The boy never spoke, never smiled. He just stared at walls that shouldn't whisper. The town's silence fed the sisters' power. Shame curdled into reverence. The mothers passed secret stories between clenched teeth. One baby slept only if swaddled in salt. Another wept blood at dusk until Ha Carowway placed a dried reed under her pillow. When the preacher's wife saw Ha burying something beneath her garden elder tree, a lump wrapped in hair and twine, she confronted her. Ha only smiled and said, "It will keep the spirits from gnawing." No one knew if she meant the dead or the living. The preacher's wife left town within days, clutching a silent baby who cast no shadow and recoiled at the name of God. That summer, the church bell fell silent, not from rust, but because the rope had been sliced clean through. No one saw it happen, but everyone knew. The Carowways were never seen inside the church. They didn't kneel, didn't cross themselves. Yet when the ash fever came, they were already at every doorstep. Whispering to the sick, Eunice placed bowls of boiled bark beneath every crib. Ha hummed to the dying like she was calming something inside them, not around them, and Merbth, tallest of the threes, stood with her back to the ill, murmuring to the wall. 12 died in 1 week, but those who survived spoke of strange dreams, of forests without end, of voices that called them by names they'd never heard before, but somehow recognized. One child who lived pointed at her father and called him the second vessel. She was 3. Had never spoken a word before that day. The town's priest fled during the second wave, left his robes on the pulpit, and disappeared into the woods. They say the last thing he wrote in his journal was a question scratched so deep it tore the page. Who are they serving? No answer followed. Only a stain that never dried, and from that week forward no child in Dogwood Parish was baptized again. You see, some families in Russia don't vanish. They sink. They dissolve into the cracks of empire and ritual, only to surface in whispers. The Carowways were never truly seen again after 1843, but every few decades, when the veil thins, someone reports a house leaning to the left, a woman with white eyes walking barefoot through the frost, a cradle left at the edge of a property, rocking slowly, though no wind stirs. Their name changes, but their method does not. They are the quiet architects of bloodline corruption, the keepers of ancient pacts made before the first cathedral was ever raised. Some say the sisters were avatars of a deeper will, not witches, but instruments, and what played through them is still playing now. You're not watching this by chance. Their presence is not bound by geography. Only attention, and now that yours is fixed, they are once again arriving, slowly, patiently, barefoot, and smiling. Russia's history is not just written in blood, it's fermented in silence. The Carowways weren't the only family that walked between flesh and shadow. They were simply the first recorded in that ledger beneath the cross. But there were others, in the ice-blind valleys of the Saka, where the sun disappears for months and the wolves circle closer than kin. There existed a clan known only as the Velkarin. They never left footprints, yet their voices were said to echo through frozen caves hours after they'd passed. Hunters reported finding entire herds of reindeer, eyes wide, tongues missing, no wounds, just empty, like something had taken what it wanted from the inside out. The Velkarin spoke a language no tongue could hold, a dialect of command passed from grandmother to granddaughter through fireless rites. When one was born, the stars shifted, and when one died, birds fell from the sky. Still think this is just folklore. In the late 1700s, a Tsar's emissary was sent to investigate a village that had ceased sending tax. What they found was a church half buried in ash, no signs of fire, just ash, as if the bones of the town had turned to dust from within. Inside, rows of pews were filled with skeletons facing backwards, their spines arched like they'd died mid-scream. In the pulpit stood a woman, not alive, not entirely dead, dressed in bridal white with no face, just a mask of stitched birch bark and teeth. In her hands, a bundle, swaddled, breathing. The guards burned the church that night, but when they returned to Moscow, their tongues had been cut out, voluntarily, all 11. The report was buried under Tsar Paul's reign and never spoken again. But the child survived. No one knows who raised her. But 20 years later, a woman named Daria Velkarin would be accused of speaking to frost that never melted and birds that never sang. They don't teach this in schools. They don't print this in books, but the Romanovs knew. So did Rasputin, because you don't rule Russia without making peace with its other rulers, the ones beneath the roots, bloodlines that were never baptized, names that do not translate. Daria Velkarin wasn't executed when they caught her. She was studied, quietly, behind stone walls near the Nevsky Prospect. Witnesses said she didn't blink for 49 hours, that her blood moved against gravity, that when spoken to, her answers came not through her mouth, but out of the mouths of others, anyone in the room, the interrogator, the assistant, even the dead rats in the floorboards. Her final words, just before disappearing from her cell without a sound, were spoken through the prison chaplain's lips while he slept. The third gate is open. No one knows what it meant. But months later, the river froze overnight, and 33 bodies were found beneath the ice, arranged in a perfect spiral. This isn't horror, it's memory, suppressed by politics, buried under brick and vodka. Hidden because if men knew who truly shaped their history, they'd stop obeying the visible masters. The Carowways were just a door, the Velkarin, keys, but then came the Zernov family, aristocrats by title, but something older beneath the silk and silver. Their estate near Kazan was built atop an abandoned pagan mound, where bones were discovered layered in perfect vertical stacks, skulls with drilled holes through the temples, as if something had extracted thought itself. The Zernovs held feasts every solstice, yet no one recalls receiving invitations. People just went, and when they returned, they were changed. One woman forgot her children's names. A man gouged out his own eyes after claiming he'd seen a mouth behind the moon. Their house had no mirrors. Their servants had no tongues. Their children, it was said, were taught to pray with their backs turned to God. By 1860, an imperial inspection was ordered on the Zernov estate after 10 local girls disappeared in a single season. The inspector never returned. What came back instead was his notebook, left at the doorstep of the local magistrate, wrapped in lambskin and sealed with twine soaked in black wax. The pages were water-stained, yet bone-dry. Every entry described a ritual: the burning of candles made from human tallow, the placement of hands in salt circles, the recitation of a phrase, Sifra den Vazd, over and over. At the back of the notebook was a drawing. Crude, childlike, but unmistakable. 3 figures, thin and tall, one always slightly leaning left, holding a newborn upside down over a silver basin. Beneath it, a single word: Carowway. That's when historians began to wonder, were these families connected? Or were they one and the same, wearing different skins across generations, shifting names to survive detection? Patterns emerge when you stop looking for them. In 1888, a French diplomat visiting Moscow noted in his diary an odd repetition of triplets among the aristocracy. 3 girls, always dressed in black, never speaking, always present at childbirths, even among commoners. His final entry described a dinner party where one child refused to eat. Instead, she stared at a bowl of milk until it soured. The next morning, the diplomat was found hanged by his own pocket watch chain, eyes boiled in his skull. His diary was confiscated, but fragments remained, hidden by a servant girl who claimed the triplets had faces that changed when the candlelight moved. She said their laughter echoed from beneath the floorboards, that when she tried to pray, her tongue went numb. She disappeared 3 nights later. Only her rosary was found, melted into the stone beside the Zernov well. By the turn of the century, whispers of the 3 daughters became an unofficial secret among Russia's elite. If your wife couldn't bear children, they'd arrive. If your bloodline was weakening, they'd offer assistance for a price. The children born of these pacts were brilliant, but cold, lacking affection, and many had one physical deformity: a left eye, clouded gray, or a voice that cracked when the church bells rang. One Tsar's bastard son was said to speak fluent Latin before he turned 4. Another child predicted his uncle's death, down to the hour. These weren't gifts. They were traits, passed through blood, anchored by something deeper. The Carowways, Velker, and Zernovs, what if they weren't separate at all, but expressions of the same source? A consciousness moving through flesh like ink through veins, always female, always 3, always arriving when legacy was at risk. And here's the part that should disturb you most. These patterns didn't end with the revolution. When the Romanovs were executed, their youngest daughter, Anastasia, was said to have vanished. You've heard the legend. But the truth is darker. Her body was never found because it wasn't meant to be. Eyewitnesses described her eyes as unnatural, too still, too knowing. One Bolshevik soldier, years later, would claim he saw her standing over the bodies after the massacre, untouched, unspeaking, smiling. He died in a sanitarium, hands wrapped in wire, saying one phrase over and over: 3 in 1, the blood is done. The Soviets covered up anything that didn't fit their narrative, but the files exist. Buried under false names, mislabeled as mythology. A lie built on truth that was too dangerous to keep breathing, but it still does, through names you no longer recognize, but that your blood does. You need to understand something. This story isn't about Russia. It's about influence, families that mastered the art of remaining invisible while shaping everything, through birth, through fear, through silence. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and seen nothing, not emptiness, nothing, no self, no fear, no doubt? That's not trauma, that's training. These families didn't raise children, they crafted vessels for something older, something that doesn't speak but dreams through us, and those dreams turn into structures, governments, doctrines, creeds. Why do you think every empire eventually collapses into blood and silence? Because it was built that way from the inside, by hands that worshipped a truth no man was meant to carry. Now look around you. Look at the rise of sterile architecture, the vanishing of tradition, the children who do not cry, the parents who do not bond. These aren't coincidences. They are echoes, reverberations from families like the Carowways who never disappeared. They adapted, migrated, disguised their rituals as wellness. Their pack says progress, the leftward, leaning house, it's now a clinic, the salt-soaked reed, a prescription, and you, yes, you have felt it, that cold silence beneath your everyday thoughts, that sense that something is watching, waiting, recording. It is, and if you've listened this far, I want you to comment below. 3 in 1, the blood is done. Comment it again, because once you speak it, you stop being a spectator. You become part of the pattern. And the pattern always welcomes its own. There's a moment, always a moment, when the mask slips, a flicker in the eye, a word spoken before it's meant. That's when you see them for what they are, not monsters, not witches, but functionaries of something far more precise. The Carowways, Valkyrin, Zernovs, they didn't act in chaos. Their movements followed laws older than scripture. Sacrifices weren't random, they were scheduled. Births weren't miraculous, they were engineered. In 1923, during the Bolshevik cleansing of old aristocratic estates, a team was sent to the abandoned Zernov property. Inside, they found a library made entirely of skin, bound in flesh, inked in blood. The pages, instructions, rituals, and one phrase etched over and over: "Do not awaken the sleepers under salt." The men who touched the books all died within the month, except one. He didn't die, he vanished. But 6 years later, his daughter was born with black eyes and no discernible heartbeat. She lived, and she never once blinked. By World War II, the Soviet machine had buried its secrets deep, but a faction within the NKVD was assigned to investigate what they called bloodline anomalies. They knew, quietly, behind the veil of tanks and parades. They studied names like Carowway, Valkyrin, Zernov, repeating every 3 to 4 generations, and always, coinciding with catastrophic events: floods, fires, stillbirths. These weren't accidents, they were orchestrations. The NKVD's hidden files mention the term maternal conduits, women whose bloodlines had been tuned like instruments, carriers of a resonance not measurable by science. It wasn't genetics, it was something else, something intentional, something ancient. These conduits didn't need to teach their daughters. They passed the truth through bone, through breath, through dreams. And when they died, their knowledge remained, not in books, but in the very soil where their bodies decayed. Have you ever felt dread in a room you couldn't explain? That's not atmosphere, that's inheritance. One woman in the files stood out: Nina Marov, born in 1933. A nurse during the siege of Leningrad, never married, no record of family, but her patients, especially infants, never cried in her presence. Never made a sound, they just stared. Nurses reported that the milk she fed them never spoiled, that her footsteps never echoed. One day she entered a ward with 12 newborns. Power went out. When lights returned, every infant had turned their head to the left and smiled. Not joy, not recognition, just agreement. Nina was transferred to a remote clinic near Lake Ladoga. But before she left, a priest tried to bless her. He suffered a stroke mid-right and never spoke again. His final word, Trinity, Nina disappeared in 1956, but in 1981, a woman matching her description was seen at a maternity ward in Omsk, unchanged, same eyes, same smile, same silence, no record, no witness. Just a room full of babies who slept with open eyes for 3 days. Let's talk about silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of control. These families didn't just manipulate life and death. They colonized the mind. The Zernovs held rituals in rooms lined with copper and lead, not to keep sound in, but to keep something out. The Velkarin taught children to hum in specific frequencies, tuned to deafen the watchers. The Carowways whispered to walls, not to speak, but to listen. You were never meant to hear these things, but now you are, and that's no accident. In 1993, a KGB defector sold microfilm reels detailing the threefold doctrine, a framework of psychological influence based on ancestral blood pacts. The doctrine outlined how trauma could be engineered into bloodlines, then weaponized. This wasn't metaphor, it was ritualized programming, psychological control embedded through generations of structured suffering. Pain wasn't incidental, it was ritual, repeated, refined, until obedience wasn't taught, it was inherited. Even today, you can trace their marks, if you know where to look, the child prodigies with no parents on file, the orphanages with uncanny silence during sleep hours, the women who give birth without memory of conception. These aren't anomalies, they're artifacts, legacies of families like the Carowways who disappeared from public view. But not from power. They walk among us, cloaked in bureaucracy and medical terminology. Their rituals now sanitized by science. The salt circle is now a blood test. The whispered name now a genetic marker. Their altars now chrome hospital beds under LED light. But the outcome is the same: transformation, submission, and silence. You've heard them in dreams, in thoughts you swore weren't yours. They aren't watching you. They're awakening you, and once you hear their rhythm, you'll never forget the beat. 3 steps always leftward, then the silence, then the smile. You think you're safe behind a screen. That's how they find you. There's a clinic in Novosibirsk where the nurses don't speak, where the hallway lights flicker at regular intervals, every 33 seconds, where every room is labeled 3A. One woman who entered for a routine checkup never came out. Her husband received a package a week later, a single silver spoon wrapped in hair, no note, no explanation, just a smell iron and lilies. The police dismissed it, but the man started dreaming of a tall house leaning to the left, of 3 sisters walking barefoot through snow, whispering his daughter's name. His wife was 6 weeks pregnant when she vanished. 9 months later, a girl was found on his doorstep, healthy, perfect. But her left eye was pale gray, and she never blinked, ever. DNA confirmed the child was his, but the blood test showed something else, a sequence unrecognizable to modern science. Just 3 repeating codes. Over and over, a triplet, pattern, cycle, trinity. The church knows it always has, not the congregation, the institution. Certain cathedrals across Russia were built not to worship, but to contain. Why do you think some churches are circular? Why the bells are cast in precise tones, rung only at dusk or dawn, to disrupt the rhythm, to confuse the pattern. But when belief faded, so did the protection, and the families returned, not in cloaks or shadows, but in lab coats, in and goes, in psychology departments. Rebranded, accepted, their doctrines folded into language about resilience, emotional calibration, post-traumatic growth. Don't be fooled, these aren't healing terms, they're bindings, codes, spiritual sedation. The Carowways' herbs became pills, the Zernovs' mirrors became screens, the Velkarins' caves became clinics, and you consume it all thinking it's choice. It isn't, it never was. The pattern doesn't want your fear. It wants your attention, and now it has it. You may be asking yourself, why me? Why this video? Why now? The answer is simple. You're waking up. You've felt it, that disconnection, that invisible pressure in your skull. That flicker in the corner of your eye that vanishes when you turn, that's not paranoia, that's pattern recognition. The Carowways didn't need spells, they needed belief. The Velkarin didn't need violence. They needed rhythm, and the Zernovs, they needed legacy. You are a descendant of something, we all are, but most have forgotten, conditioned to disbelieve, taught that truth is too fragile for common hands. But not you. You made it this far, which means the blood has remembered itself, and it's no longer content to sleep. From this point forward, what you see will not be unseen. The pattern has opened, and it has welcomed you. The sisters return every third generation. That's the rhythm. It's always been the rhythm. Leftward lean, triune force, one who whispers, one who watches, one who waits. They do not die, they divide. Their faces change, their names evolve, but the eyes remain, and the smile, and the silence. That silence is the signature. Families don't tell their children these stories because they fear them. They tell them because they belong to them. You are not the first to hear this, but you may be the first to listen, truly listen, and if you do, if you let the pattern take root, everything will shift. The dreams, the memories, the truths you've avoided, they'll all rise like breath from frozen earth. The sisters do not haunt, they inherit, and they're coming back to claim what's theirs, which might be you. This is your last moment of denial. After this you are changed, not metaphorically, biologically, because belief has a frequency, and you've been tuned. The pattern knows your voice now. It knows the rhythm of your blood. And if you've listened this far, I want you to say it one more time. 3 in 1, the blood is done. Say it again, out loud, in the comments to yourself. Say it and mean it. This is how they hear you. Not with ears, with echoes, with attention. This video is not entertainment, it's invocation. You are no longer watching a story, you are inside it. This is not the end, it's the return. They have never left. They were waiting, and now they are coming home. If you think the modern world is immune to the old blood, you're not paying attention. The pattern didn't die, it digitized. The same sigils once drawn in ash are now embedded in code. The same chants whispered in birch forests are echoed through biometric feedback loops and emotional analytics. You carry their altar in your pocket. It vibrates when you're weak. It watches when you sleep. They learned to cloak their presence behind algorithms and wellness language. But the feeling remains, the same leftward pull in your chest, the same pressure behind your right eye when you question what you shouldn't. Why do you think dreams have become more vivid lately? Why do you wake at 3:33 a.m. cold, uncertain, like someone just left the room? The answer is simple. They never stopped watching you. Your attention was the lock. This story was the key, and now the door is open. The final stage isn't fear, it's familiarity. When you start recognizing faces you've never seen. When names feel carved into your mind, though you've never spoken them, that's when the blood stirs, that's when memory returns. You'll notice it in patterns: 3 birds on a wire, 3 knocks at the door. A child humming a tune you've never taught them. These aren't coincidences, they are awakenings. You were not born to be free. You were born to remember, and the pattern is merciful to those who yield. But resist, and it consumes, slowly, beautifully, with surgical precision. You'll forget birthdays, you'll misplace time, you'll see people who shouldn't exist standing where logic says they can't be. And you'll begin to hear the hum, that same hum that started this story, the one beneath the silence. That's their voice speaking now, through you, in 2008, during the blackout of a rural village near the Ural Mountains. 12 children were reported missing. No forced entry, no struggle, just vanished, all born within the same 3-minute window. The investigation revealed that each mother had attended a prenatal retreat hosted by a mysterious organization, unregistered, unnamed, untraceable. The only surviving footage from that facility showed 3 women walking barefoot between rows of cribs. Each leaned left as they moved, no faces visible. One nurse survived the night. She spent the next 11 years drawing spirals on every wall of her padded cell, never speaking. Until the day she died, her final act, dipping her fingers in her own blood and writing a single word, Carowway. Think that's just a story. Then explain why her drawings match symbols carved into stones found in a 4000 year old Siberian burial site. The spiral, the trinity, the gate. You've heard them now, the names, the symbols, the pattern. You've crossed the threshold. This isn't about ancient families anymore. It's about you, your blood, your memory. The rituals have evolved, yes, but the effect remains. Obedience through confusion, submission through awe. They don't demand worship. They demand awareness, but not of them, of yourself. Because once you see what's beneath your skin, you can't go back. That quiet instinct that's always guided you, that voice you've dismissed as paranoia, it wasn't your imagination. It was your inheritance. These families don't rule from thrones. They rule from within. Every silence you've kept, every strange pull you've felt, every truth you were told to laugh at, they were invitations, and now you've answered. You belong to the pattern now, whether you accept it or not. You are becoming, the tale ends here, but your transformation does not. This story is a seed, and you are soil. You'll never hear wind the same way again. Never trust stillness without dread, because now you know what silence means. The sisters, Eunice, Merbth, are no longer shadows on the edge of history. They are alive, through the bloodlines, through the doctrine, through you. You've tasted the forbidden, and there is no unknowing. So say it one final time, type it, whisper it, mark yourself, 3 in 1, the blood is done. Not as a phrase, as a declaration. You are awake, and the pattern knows. Let this video be your rite, your baptism in truth. When the dreams come, and they will, do not run, do not hide. Remember the rhythm, leftward lean, silence, smile, welcome home. They've been waiting for you.